Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty unique today. It's the 27th chapter of the Quran.
Surah An-Naml.
Yeah, Surah An-Naml, the ant.
The ant.
So I'm really curious to get into this, especially that whole story about Solomon and the ant. It sounds pretty fascinating, right?
It really is. The Quran is a sacred text for Muslims.
Right.
It's followed by well over 1 billion people.
Wow.
And this chapter in particular, well, it's filled with stories and lessons that, give you a glimpse into its rich teachings.
Okay, yeah. So let's start unpacking this. What really struck me right away was how the chapter begins. It jumps right into some core Islamic beliefs.
Absolutely. The opening verses, they really emphasize the importance of, well, a few things: faith, good deeds, and believing in the afterlife. These are, they're foundational concepts in Islam.
Right.
They set the stage for everything that comes after.
Yeah, it's laying down the groundwork saying, listen up, here's what really matters.
Right.
Like it talks about those who pray, give charity, and believe in the hereafter as being guided. But then it says those who don't are, it describes them as wandering aimlessly.
Right.
That's powerful imagery. It really drives home the idea that faith provides direction in life.
Exactly. It's not just about believing in God, but it's about putting that belief into action through prayer, giving to charity, and just living a life that reflects those values. This connection between what you believe and how you act. It's really central to the Islamic faith.
Yeah. It makes you think about your own life,
Yeah.
What guides your actions, what gives you a sense of purpose. And then it dives into a story that many might find familiar, even if they're not familiar with the Quran, the story of Moses and the burning bush. I remember this one from Sunday school, but I'm really curious to hear how it's presented in the Quran. What I really found striking reading this excerpt was the sheer awe of that moment when God speaks directly to Moses. Like the Quran quotes God saying, "O Moses, it is I, Allah, the Almighty, the Wise."
Yeah. The burning bush itself is a really powerful symbol.
Oh, yeah.
Representing the presence of the divine fire. Well, in many, many spiritual traditions, it's seen as a purifying force. And here it really represents God's power and holiness. It's no coincidence that Moses encounters God in such a dramatic and awe-inspiring way.
And then there's that amazing detail about Moses' stack transforming into a snake. It's like something straight out of a fantasy movie, but it really underscores, the miraculous nature of this whole encounter.
It reinforces the idea that God's power, it transcends the laws of nature as we understand them. It's a moment of divine intervention meant to instill both awe and fear in Moses.
Yeah. It also sets the stage for Moses' mission, right? He's chosen to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And this encounter with God, it gives him the authority and the courage to face that challenge.
Exactly. It's a turning point in Moses' life. It marks the beginning of his prophetic journey.
Speaking of powerful figures, the chapter then introduces us to King Solomon, famous for his wisdom. The Quran says he could even understand the language of birds.
That's right. And it's important to remember that Solomon is the son of David, another really prominent figure in both the Bible and the Quran. He inherited this legacy of leadership and piety, and he's presented as a model ruler guided by divine wisdom. And that ability to understand the language of animals, it really emphasizes his unique connection to the natural world.
Wow, yeah.
And his deep understanding of God's creation.
That's incredible. And this brings us to the story that gives the chapter its name, right? Solomon and the ant. It's such a kind of charming little story. But I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, definitely. It's a story that has resonated with people across cultures and religions. On the surface, it's about Solomon and his army marching.
Right.
And this tiny ant warning her colony to get inside so they don't get trampled. But what's remarkable is that Solomon hears her.
He does. He hears her. And not only does he hear her, but he actually stops and reflects on what she said. It's such a powerful image of humility, especially considering, Solomon's status as a king.
Yeah.
He could have easily ignored her.
Right.
But instead, he acknowledges the ant's wisdom. He even praises God for allowing him to understand her.
Exactly. It challenges our assumptions about where wisdom can be found.
Yeah.
We often associate it with power, age, experience. But this story suggests that even the smallest creatures can offer valuable insights.
And it says a lot about Solomon's character. Despite his power and authority, he remains humble. He's open to learning from unexpected sources. It makes me wonder, what lessons might we be missing by overlooking the wisdom of the seemingly insignificant?
It's a powerful question. This story encourages us to pay attention, to be open to the lessons that the world around us is constantly offering, even in the most unexpected places.
So we've got faith, good deeds, divine power, respect for all creatures. I mean, it's amazing how much is packed into just these opening verses.
And we're just getting started. The chapter goes on to introduce another fascinating character, the Queen of Sheba.
Oh, yeah.
Whose story is intertwined with themes of power, wealth, and ultimately spiritual awakening.
Yeah. Her story is next, and I am particularly intrigued by that whole throne teleportation incident. That sounds pretty wild.
It is. It's a moment that blurs the lines between the physical and the spiritual, and it speaks volumes about the power of God and the limitations of earthly possessions.
Well, I am hooked. Let's dive into the Queen of Sheba's story after a quick...
Actually, let's just keep going.
Okay.
Her story picks up right where we left off, and I think it'll be really fascinating to see how it unfolds in light of what we've already discussed.
Okay, all right, you've convinced me. Lead the way. So the Queen of Sheba, she sounds like quite a character. The Quran describes her as having this magnificent throne and ruling over this wealthy kingdom. I'm picturing, I don't know, something out of a fairy tale. Like dazzling palaces and elaborate processions,
It's quite a vivid description, and it's believed to have, well, historical roots.
Oh, okay.
Sheba, I mean, it's likely connected to ancient civilizations in the Arabian Peninsula. They were known for their wealth and trade routes.
Right.
Frankincense, myrrh, all those exotic goods.
Wow. So her story is grounded in real history. That makes it even more interesting. But the Quran says that initially she resisted Solomon's message. What was it about his message that she found so objectionable?
Well, Solomon was a prophet, chosen by God to deliver his message to the people. And in the Quran, he invites the Queen of Sheba to abandon the worship of idols and turn to the worship of the one true God, Allah. And this was a pretty radical idea.
Yeah.
It challenged her existing beliefs and really the foundation of her society.
Yeah, it makes sense that she'd be hesitant, especially considering, she was a powerful ruler in her own right. Challenging her beliefs would be, it would be like challenging her authority.
Exactly. But the Quran tells this fascinating story of how Solomon, through his wisdom and divine guidance, well, he eventually convinces her of the truth of his message.
And this is where we get to that, incredible story about her throne, right?
Yeah.
The Quran says it was miraculously transported to Solomon's palace. That's some serious magic.
It definitely captures the imagination. It's likely meant to be understood as a demonstration of God's power. Imagine the queen's surprise when she sees her own throne.
Right.
This symbol of her power and authority just sitting in Solomon's court.
Talk about a power move. It's almost like Solomon is saying, look, I can bring your throne here in an instant. What makes you think you can resist the power of God?
It's a powerful message. It's likely intended to highlight the idea that earthly possessions and power, they pale in comparison to the power of the divine. The queen's throne, no matter how grand, it's ultimately insignificant compared to the might of God.
It definitely makes you rethink your priorities. So the Queen of Sheba's story, it's this fascinating blend of history, power dynamics, and spiritual awakening. It sounds like, a powerful reminder that even the wealthiest and most powerful individuals, they can find true fulfillment in submitting to a higher power.
Yeah, it's a theme that runs throughout the Quran. The chapter then shifts gears a bit, focusing on stories that serve as cautionary tales, I guess. We encounter the Thamud people and the prophet Lot.
Right.
Both of whom, they face consequences for rejecting divine guidance.
Yeah, these stories are definitely intense. The Thamud people, known for their arrogance and their defiance, were called to worship Allah by the prophet Salah, but they refused. And they suffered a devastating fate as a result.
Their story serves as a warning against pride and the dangers of rejecting God's message. It highlights this idea that actions have consequences, both in this life and in the hereafter.
And then there's the story of the prophet Lot, which deals with some really challenging topics. His community engaged in behavior that was condemned by God, and they faced divine retribution for their actions.
These stories can be difficult to read, but they serve a crucial purpose within the Quran. They emphasize the importance of moral conduct and, living in accordance with God's will. They also highlight this idea of accountability, that we will be held responsible for our choices.
Yeah. It makes you stop and think about the choices you're making, right? Like, are you living a life that aligns with your values? Are you striving to do good and avoid actions that might harm yourself or others?
Absolutely. These stories, I mean, they're not meant to simply recount historical events.
Yeah.
You know, they're intended to guide us, to make us reflect on our own lives and choices.
Yeah, it's like the Quran is saying, pay attention, learn from the mistakes of others, and choose wisely.
Exactly. And speaking of guidance, the chapter then shifts focus to the Quran itself.
Interesting. So it's not just a collection of stories and moral lessons. It's also a statement about the importance of the Quran as a source of, well, divine knowledge and guidance.
Precisely. The Quran positions itself as the final revelation from God, clarifying and superseding previous scriptures. It's a message for all of humanity,
Wow.
offering a path to salvation and eternal life for those who believe.
So it's not just about stories from the past, it's about offering a guide for the present and the future.
Yeah, and it also acknowledges the limitations of human understanding. There's a passage that says, "You cannot make the dead hear, nor can you make the deaf hear the call if they turn their backs and flee, nor can you guide the blind out of their straying."
That's a powerful image. It suggests that no matter how hard we try, some people may simply refuse to listen or to understand. Ultimately, it's up to each individual to choose whether or not to accept the message.
It speaks to the concept of free will, a cornerstone of Islamic belief. God gives us the choice to believe or disbelieve, and with that choice comes responsibility.
Yeah, it also suggests that trying to force someone to believe is, it's ultimately futile. You can't make someone see what they don't want to see.
Exactly. Faith is a deeply personal journey, and it can't be coerced or imposed.
And then there's that passage about a creature emerging from the earth to challenge humanity's disbelief.
Right.
That one really caught my attention. Like, what's the meaning behind that?
It's one of the more, enigmatic passages in the Quran, and it's sparked a lot of discussion among scholars. Some interpret it literally as a prediction of a future event where a creature will appear as, a sign of God's power. Others see it as more of a metaphor for, the inner voice of conscience, the voice that will question us about our choices on the day of judgment.
Ooh, I like that interpretation. It's a reminder that ultimately we will be held accountable for our beliefs and actions. No matter how much we might try to ignore that inner voice, it will eventually catch up with us.
Right, and it connects to another theme that runs throughout the chapter, the uncertainty of the future.
Yeah.
No one knows when they will die or what awaits them in the afterlife. This uncertainty, it's meant to inspire humility and a sense of dependence on God.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? Despite all our knowledge and our achievements, we're ultimately at the mercy of forces beyond our control.
It's a reminder to live each day with intention, to strive to do good, and to seek guidance from a power greater than ourselves.
And that brings us to another, central message, right? The importance of relying on God. The chapter repeatedly emphasizes that true knowledge and guidance, it comes from God alone.
Yeah. There's a line that says, "So rely on Allah. You are upon the clear truth." It's a call to action. It's urging believers to place their trust in God, even when things are difficult or uncertain.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's about surrendering control and trusting in a higher power.
It ties back to that initial emphasis on faith and good deeds. It's about living a life that reflects those beliefs, trusting that God is guiding us on the right path.
So much to unpack in this chapter. As we approach the final verses of this excerpt, what are some key things we should keep in mind?
Well, this chapter really emphasizes the importance of faith, good deeds, and belief in the afterlife. It uses powerful stories and imagery to illustrate the consequences of rejecting divine guidance and the importance of seeking knowledge and guidance from God. Ultimately, it's a call to submit to a higher power and live a life of, purpose and meaning.
It's been an incredible journey so far. So many insights and thought-provoking ideas. Ready to delve into the final verses, see what other, gems of wisdom we can uncover.
Absolutely. I'm curious to see how it all ties together.
All right, we're back. I'm really curious to see how this chapter wraps up. We've covered so much ground from from the importance of faith and action to the consequences of rejecting divine guidance and that mind-blowing story about the Queen of Sheba's throne.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? And these final verses, they really bring everything together, offering a sense of closure and a final push towards reflection.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. One of the first things that struck me in these verses is how it talks about the vastness and the complexity of creation. There's this line that says, "There is no mystery in the heaven and the earth, but it is in a clear book." What's the significance of that statement?
It's a powerful declaration of God's all-encompassing knowledge. Everything that exists, from, the smallest grain of sand to the vast expanse of the cosmos, it's all part of God's divine plan. And this clear book, well, it refers to the Quran itself, which is seen as a source of guidance and knowledge for all of humanity.
It's like saying that all the answers we seek, all the mysteries we're trying to unravel are ultimately contained within the Quran.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that God is the source of all knowledge, and the Quran is a way for us to tap into that infinite wisdom.
Yeah. It also suggests that there's an underlying order and purpose to the universe. Even if we don't always understand it, it's comforting in a way, knowing that it's not just random chaos.
Right. It's a reminder that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. A grand design orchestrated by a power beyond our comprehension.
And yet, despite that vastness, the Quran also acknowledges the limits of human knowledge, particularly, I guess, when it comes to the afterlife. There's a passage that says, "No one in the heavens or on earth knows the future except Allah."
Yeah, and this is a crucial point. It's about recognizing our limitations as human beings.
Yeah.
We can strive to understand the world around us, but ultimately the future is, it's in God's hands.
It's about surrendering control,
Yeah.
accepting that there are things we simply can't know. It can be a tough pill to swallow, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and encouraged to seek answers for everything.
It is. It requires humility, a willingness to let go of the need to know everything. But the Quran suggests that this surrender, it ultimately leads to peace and acceptance.
It's interesting how this chapter touches on so many different levels of existence, from the cosmic to the very personal. It's a reminder that we're all interconnected, part of this grand tapestry woven by God.
Exactly. And then as we approached the end of the chapter, we encounter a passage where some people are expressing doubt about the idea of resurrection. They're essentially saying, how can we be brought back to life after we've turned to dust?
It's a question that has probably crossed the minds of many people throughout history, right? The idea of life after death. I mean, it can be a difficult concept to grasp.
It is, but the Quran responds to this doubt with unwavering certainty. It asserts that resurrection is not only possible, but it's inevitable. It's a fundamental belief in Islam, and it's presented here as an undeniable truth.
It's like the text is saying, look, I know this might sound unbelievable, but trust me on this one, it's going to happen.
Right. It speaks to the power of faith, the belief in something beyond our current understanding.
And then the excerpt ends with this powerful call to action. It says, "Say, praise belongs to Allah. He will show you his signs and you will recognize them. Your Lord is not heedless of what you do." Mm-hmm. It's a reminder that our actions matter, that we're being watched and evaluated.
Yeah, it's a powerful note to end on. It leaves us with a sense of both awe and responsibility. The awe is the power and majesty of God, and a sense of responsibility for our choices and actions. We are accountable for how we live our lives.
It's a reminder that we're not just wandering aimlessly through life, as the chapter described, those who don't believe. We have a purpose, a path to follow, and a higher power guiding us along the way.
Beautifully said. This chapter from the Quran, just a glimpse into this vast and complex text. It offers a profound meditation on faith, justice, and the meaning of life.
It's been an incredible journey. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this chapter, and yet I've gained so many insights. I encourage our listeners to explore the Quran further, and see what resonates with them.
Yeah, and remember, even the smallest creatures, like the ant, can offer profound wisdom. Keep your eyes open, your minds curious, and your hearts receptive to the wonders that surround you.
Well said. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.